If you're a leader or an aspiring leader in the business of lifelong learning, you're in the right place. I'm Celisa Steele.
And I'm Jeff Cobb, and this is the Leading Learning Podcast.
Welcome to episode 222 of the Leading Learning Podcast, in which Celisa and I talk about 6 trends set to impact learning businesses in 2020 and beyond. Namely, learning experience design, sustainability for conferences, pathways, 5G and quantum computing, the move to marketing maturity, and artificial intelligence.
You'll get a bit more on each of these 6 trends in just a minute, but we want to let you know that we're taking our own advice, practicing what we preach, and doing a little repurposing of content. The discussion of the 6 trends that you're about to hear is the audio from a webinar, which we also streamed using Facebook Live at the end of December. And we thought podcast listeners would benefit from hearing about the 6 trends.
Indeed, we did. And we also think you would benefit from an infographic we put together to highlight what learning businesses told us at the end of 2018 were their 6 most important focus areas for 2019. To develop the infographic, we reached out to a small but diverse group of practitioners, experts, and service providers working in the learning business to get their perspectives. And this resulted in a list of 15 areas that we asked about in a broadly distributed online survey to which more than 200 organizations responded. The 6 trends we highlight from that survey are still relevant, and several of them actually tie into the 6 we talk about for 2020. We'll link to the infographic in the show notes to this episode at leadinglearning.com/episode 222. And by following that link, you'll also have the opportunity to download the summary data on the full list of 15 trends in the survey.
And when you visit the show notes, you'll also find the reflection questions that go with this episode. And those are, first, which of the 6 trends that we discuss for 2020 are most relevant for and most likely to impact your learning business? And second, are you prepared for their impact and to capitalize on those most relevant to you trends? How might you better prepare?
And now, without further ado, let's dig into the 6 learning business trends for 2020.
Hi, I'm Celisa Steele.
And I'm Jeff Cobb, and thanks for joining us today for our take on 2020 learning business trends. And if you've been to our previous webinars, you'll notice we're doing this one a bit differently. We don't have any slides prepared. It's going to be the 2 of us talking here, and hopefully you talking too, some in the chat and engaging. We do want to hear from you throughout to comment on what we say, and we'll also hopefully have some discussion around ideas from the chat towards the end of the session today.
It's also a shorter session than we usually do. We typically do hour-long webinars. This one we're thinking is going to be about 30 minutes. But again, a lot will depend on how much you have to add, how much you have to share. So we'll kind of play it by ear. We might wrap up a little bit early. We might go a little bit longer if there's good discussion going on.
So we're going to talk about trends today, and we'll say at the very beginning that we're not going to talk about some of the things that have been usual suspects in recent years, things like microlearning and digital badging and personalization. Those all continue to be trends, but we've talked about them quite a bit. A lot of other people have talked about them. We think they'll continue to mature in the next year. Hopefully we'll continue to see better definitions, maybe the emergence of some standards, some real practices around those. But those will pop up. They'll pop up in our trends today, but we're not going to focus on those specifically as trends. What we're going to do is each take 3 trends that we're seeing right now, just based on our experience, what we're hearing from people, what we're seeing out there, kind of trade back and forth on those for the next 20 minutes or so. And again, we'd like for you to comment all along the way if you're hearing things that resonate with you, if you're doing any of these things or pursuing any of these things. And again, this is much less formal than usual, so we might be referring to notes and stumbling and bumbling some along the way. That's just the nature of going live. Oh, and I'll mention too, we are actually live on Facebook right now as well. So hello to anybody who actually is watching there live right now or who happens to be watching later. And we'll be sure to post a link to that as well as to this Zoom video for folks to be able to access afterwards. So
And I also mentioned, if you are going to share in the chat, make sure to check everyone so that all panelists and attendees are what you see selected in the chat window. That will make sure that not only do Jeff and I get to see whatever you're asking or sharing, but that anybody else who's paying attention to that chat window here in Zoom will be able to see your thoughts.
And might have something valuable to share with you. So definitely take advantage of that. So the first trend we're going to highlight out of the 6 we'll do here is learning experience design. And this is one that's not a new trend. You've probably heard this term before, but we feel like it's becoming much more of a thing now, particularly with learning businesses and the types of organizations that we tend to work with and that tend to be on this type of webinar that we're holding. And in general, the word experience is big right now. We're hearing about customer experience and marketing. We've heard about user experience for a long time in the world of web design. So this is really picking up on that from those disciplines and focusing in on the experience of the person who is doing the learning. And there are a couple things going on here. One is just the growing recognition that some of our traditional approaches to education that can be kind of codified and formalized into courses and classes, those aren't how we've ever really learned, and they're certainly not how we learn now. So how do we get more into the flow of life, the flow of work, the actual experience of the learner, and blend that learning experience into what they're doing in life? So that's one take on it. And then I think there's also sort of a critique in there of traditional instructional design, which has tended to be very focused on methodology. And sometimes too focused on methodology, getting a little too strict about checking the boxes, going through the steps. So this is, again, focusing more on the human being, the learner, rather than on the instructional methods. And it's also very goal-oriented, because very often instructional design, again, is about checking those boxes, doesn't necessarily keep in mind that larger experience that the learner is engaged in. And all of this jives very well with our view that learning is definitely an ongoing process. It's not a single event, and we need to stop treating it like that. And that's kind of at the heart of learning experience design.
Well, Jeff, and I've heard you too say that it's basically a mindset shift, right? That you kind of have to rethink and really put that learner front and center rather than the methodology or the process. And we also know how powerful mindset is, and so shifting mindset can really change things quite a lot.
And often not easy to do. There's, I think, probably
That's
everybody
right.
who recognizes.
Okay, so learner experience design, that's the first trend that we wanted to touch on. The second trend is around sustainability and conferences. And in 2020, the environmental impact of conferences, particularly big place-based conferences, is going to become a more common concern. We're already hearing talk about eco-friendly and green and more sustainable events. And I think in the year ahead and beyond, more organizations are going to continue thinking or begin thinking really hard about what steps they need to take to make sure that their events are more sustainable. It might be things like, eliminating use of plastic water bottles, but it might also, be things like choosing a LEED certified venue. But there are some environmental impacts of big conferences that are hard to mitigate. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of Fliegscham, and maybe,
I'm sure everybody's heard of that.
And pardon my pronunciation because I probably did not get that right, but it's this Swedish word that's been coined to describe the guilt that some people feel when they have to travel. They know that air travel produces a lot of CO2 emissions, and so they feel guilty about that. And a lot of people are looking for different approaches and different ways to travel because of that. And that's why we have the great Greta Thunberg, the Swedish climate activist, and she sailed to and from the U.S. This year, and that's because she didn't want to contribute those CO2 emissions to
walking the walk, sailing the sail.
That's right, absolutely. And so, we have Fliegscham and we have flight shaming, which could maybe sound a little bit flippant. So I don't want to sound too flippant because I really do believe that climate change is a serious issue. Just last month, the United Nations released their latest emissions gap report, which paints a pretty dire picture if we don't change behavior. And of course, one of those behaviors that we could change is eliminating or reducing our use of air travel. And so because of that, I think we're going to see a growth in virtual events and virtual conferences in 2020 and beyond, because of course, the easiest way to mitigate the negative environmental impacts of flying is to not fly. But so many big conferences, particularly those with national or international audiences, basically have flying baked in. But if you go virtual, you can eliminate that impact. And to go along with that too, then virtual also has the benefit of helping your organization potentially broaden its reach. We know that historically, so many organizations only reach a fraction of their audience, a fraction of their membership with whatever annual place-based event they might have. And so by going virtual, you can potentially reach more of your audience, just make that event available to people who would never have the budget or the sort of family situation that might let them leave for several days at a time. And so going virtual allows you to tap into that and to do so in a more environmentally friendly and sustainable way.
So you heard it here first that Swedish guilt is trending along with sailing to meetings. So we expect both of those to be big. And we'll note that we currently are not suffering from flea scum, if I'm butchering it, but because we do, in fact, hold our own event virtually, Learning Technology Design, which we'll talk a little bit more about later coming up in February, is a virtual conference. We do have a couple of comments that have come in. I'll note before I give my next one here. Tobin has asked how we see LX. And LX, John has asked about what is that. LX means learning experience. So LX design, learning experience design, how does that fit in with an organization's overarching efforts involving CX, which is customer experience writ large? It seems like the two would support one another. Yes, absolutely. We didn't quite connect those dots when we were talking about it, but this talk, your learner is your customer for people who are on this webinar for the most part. So making learning or experience design really is fully part of customer experience design, and it's part of the overall experience with your business. If your learning business is part of a larger organization like an association, it's all part of that. Misan has asked, do we have data around the carbon footprint of online conferences versus in person? We don't have it at our fingertips right now, but there is data out there about it, and maybe we can find some and post it in the follow-up to this. But it's definitely out there. If you Google that, you will find that. And no, as far as I know, Tobin, there's not a 12-step program for FleexCom, but maybe we need to develop that. I don't know. So let's move on to the third trend here, and this is what we're just calling pathways, basically. And there's always been a lot of desire by organizations to create learning paths within, say, their learning management system so they can kind of connect the dots together. We're talking kind of bigger than that. This goes back to, connects to the whole learner experience thing. And it's the recognition that, the world of work changes out there, life changes out there very quickly now. Often it's not helpful to access a big catalog of courses. You need to know what you need to do, what path you need to take in learning in order to be able to take the path that you want to take in your career and in your life. And we're hearing more and more organizations that are focusing on this. How do they really not just create courses, not even just connect courses together, but really articulate the vision for the path in the particular field or profession that they serve for different parts, different phases, and different stages of careers. In fact, I've got a description here from the NIGP, the Institute for Governmental Purchasing, Public Procurement, that they've got a new pathways program, and they describe it as competency-based learning and credentialing pathways that can be personalized and customized for every phase and every stage of your working life in public procurement. And if I were a procurement professional, that would sound awfully good to me. And we're expecting to see more and more of that. We will actually have Veronica Diaz talking about what EDUCAUSE is doing with career pathways at LTD this year as well. So we expect to see a lot more focus on pathways in the coming year.
And thanks, Jennifer, for sharing. She says that she's seen some recent research that Gen Y and Gen Z see their careers as journeys, not as a linear process or pathway, and that's very different compared to how Gen X and Boomers tend to see things. So thanks for contributing that.
Yep. Definitely.
So for the fourth trend, I want to touch on two emerging technologies, quantum computing and 5G. Earlier this year, Google's quantum computer solved an equation in 200 seconds that Summit, the world's fastest traditional supercomputer, said it could solve in 10,000 years. So 200 seconds versus 10,000 years. I mean, that's absolutely astonishing.
Can't even compute that really,
Right.
so to speak.
And so, I think it's going to be amazing to see what happens when we have that kind of rapid processing power very widely and readily available. And then in 2020, I think we're also going to we're going to begin to be able to use 5G. And 5G is the next generation wireless network technology. It's meant to be much faster than what we have access to currently, faster than 4G by maybe 50 to 100 times, faster than the broadband that we can access as consumers in our homes today. But not only is it faster, it's also supposed to have less latency built in. So that means we're going to get faster responses to our requests. And it also is going to expand capacity because it's going to tap into other spectrum like the millimeter wave. And so we're going to have faster access and more readily available and more consistent. So even as we're walking or driving around with our mobile devices, that access is going to be smooth across the entire process. Now, quantum computing and 5G, I don't actually find them all that interesting in and of themselves. I don't honestly understand the technology behind them all that well. Like we're saying, just the whole idea of a calculation that takes 10,000 years to solve just doesn't even really make sense to me.
I just want it to work. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. But so what I find interesting about these two emerging technologies is what they will enable. We have quantum computing and we have 5G. They are technologies, they are tools, they are means to ends. But once we have the power and the ubiquity and the speed of quantum computing and 5G readily available, just think about what we're going to be able to do in terms of really making use of big data, what it's going to make possible with the Internet of Things and self-driving cars, things that really require that real-time data from sensors. All that's going to become much more viable. And all that's going to impact then how we work and how we live. And of course, anytime how we work and how we live changes, then how we learn and what we need to learn changes too. So I think it'll be really interesting to see over the years ahead what learning businesses do to harness quantum computing and 5G and how they impact what we deliver.
Yeah. And I don't claim to be an expert in this at all, but I understand that the availability of 5G could have a big impact on virtual reality and the ability to use virtual reality, both to create and deliver it, but then probably more importantly for the end user to really have the kind of experiences that we hope to have out of virtual reality. And at that point, it starts to become so many learning businesses are already interested in what they're going to be able to do with virtual reality. Haven't really latched onto it yet. I think things will start to shift with 5G in particular and quantum computing. Those both make a huge difference. Before I jump to the next one, I will note in the chat here that Misan has said that they are reorganizing their entire catalog around pathways, specifically around the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Excellent. Specifically as it relates to what architects, designers can do to support these goals in their practices. So that's fantastic. And I know we have some folks who are interested in the SDGs there, the Sustainable Development Goals, and Misan is happy to share about that. And Tobin is asking if there are any downsides that we see to quantum computing and e.g. security risk. Are there any security risk with it?
I'm sure absolutely that there are.
There are always downsides.
Yeah, there are going to be downsides. I think there are going to be security risks just as there are with current technologies. But I don't have a lot of specifics to share about specific concerns. But I think that yes, there will be drawbacks. I also think too with 5G right now, it's still much more of a promise than a reality. And that's what we're thinking will begin to tip some in 2020. But it's like until you really have the much broader availability of it, it doesn't really matter much. And then, of course, once it is more broadly available, then yes, there will be probably increased security risks and downsides to it. But again, I think that's true of technology today as well.
Right. We are not quantum computing or 5G experts, even though we're playing them on Zoom right now. So do your research, definitely. But Misan also comments that the VR, the virtual reality comment around 5G quantum computing reminds him that you can now attend conferences in VR, and he says VR app, and playing within the Oculus Quest software is very powerful. So yeah, I mean, we talked about this in our last learning technology design, and we had somebody from AICPA, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, talk about what they're doing with virtual reality. It's really much more approachable and within reach than people think it is right now. And this is just going to make it's going to help make that quantum leap, I think, so to speak. Right now. So there we go. All right, so let's talk about the fifth item that we have for this session. And we're characterizing this as a movement towards marketing maturity. And we always talk about marketing a lot. It's one of our sort of main things to help learning businesses be able to market themselves effectively from strategy on up. But we feel like we're now really starting to hear more organizations both talk about it and take action around, better understanding their market and figuring out new ways to engage with their market more effectively, from the promotional techniques to their pricing. And there are at least a couple of drivers here. One, of course, is it is getting more competitive out there day by day, more people entering the whole learning business. The barriers are down for doing that. We've talked about that for years. And then also the fragmentation of the channels for reaching your customers. You can't just, print the mailer and send it out, or do the email blast these days and expect that to get the results for you. You have to be able to reach your learners in multiple channels. It kind of connects back to that customer experience and learner experience design as well. How are you designing your marketing engagements in ways that you really are meeting your learners where they are and engaging them in different ways at the right times to pull them in? And so we generally talk about kind of 5 key components, pillars around marketing. These are all areas where we expect to see further development, some more than others in the coming year. Acquiring and leveraging meaningful data, that'll be one of the biggest ones. That applies to learning and the design of learning, but it applies to understanding your market in general and being able to market effectively. So organizations really have to be able to do that. Brand is going to be increasingly important. We've talked about this before. It's getting harder and harder to be found on just generic searches around, say, a topic or a training need in Google. It's much more effective if somebody is going to search for you, for your organization by name. So you don't want them to be typing in, I need, training on X or continuing medical education on X. You want them to say, I want this learning business. I want this organization's learning, or the brand of that learning line. To even brand your learning products is becoming increasingly important. So a focus on brand is going to be very important in 2020. Having an omni-channel approach. To the extent that you don't already, and getting much more sophisticated about it if you do. And this means that, yes, you need to have email as a marketing channel. That's not going to go away. That's still effective, but it's not as effective. It's harder and harder to get into the inbox and get people to click. You need to make sure you know how to leverage search well, what's working, what's not with search. You need to make sure you understand how to leverage social media well. You need to understand things like using messengers, using chatbots, using push notifications on websites, all of this stuff. You need to have this portfolio of approaches to be able to reach your learners and pull them in. Along with that, content marketing. I think our feeling is so learning businesses in general have tended to lag behind on content marketing because they're so focused on the content that people actually register for, pay for, but you got to provide that value up front to get them there in the first place, to hook them. And that goes back to that customer experience, that customer journey, learner experience, learner journey. Before they're paying, before they're enrolling, you're engaging with them as learners and providing that value and doing that, even better going forward. And then copywriting, which has always been sort of an Achilles heel, I think, for so many learning businesses. You send out those email blasts, you put together those conference flyers, but the copy that's written for it, just isn't hooking people and pulling them in. So those 5 pillars, acquiring and leveraging meaningful data, brand, the omni-channel approach, content marketing, effective copywriting, all of those, focusing on them towards marketing maturity in 2020.
Well, and I just was at a UPCEA event in New Orleans, and it's a University Professional Continuing Education Association. But it was all about marketing, and the level of sophistication around both
they're doing,
the tools they're using and the analytics that they're doing both on social media and posts. It was really inspiring in some ways around the level of sophistication there. And then I'll just make one other comment too around you mentioned that content marketing can maybe be something that the learning businesses haven't focused on that much. But of course, the irony there is that they have great resources for content marketing because we do have all of that learning content that we've put all the time and effort into. So carving out bits and pieces of that and making it available as content marketing can be really effective.
Definitely. And I'll mention too that we have Tony Paley, who's the Chief Revenue Officer for AIM, Imaging Association, talking about essentially conversion rate optimization at upcoming LTD. We'll have other sessions that talk about marketing. So for those who are looking to learn, plenty out there to help you with that.
And I'll note too that we've seen a couple of questions come in about more information and some resources about pathways. We can certainly include some of that in the follow-up materials, just as so if there's questions, and we can provide some links to some examples, for example.
Yeah, we'll link to the NIGP pathways, for example. Misan, if you have a link that we can share, we'll share that. We'll share if EDUCAUSE, Veronica Diaz, if they have anything they can share, we'll get that up there.
And so the sixth and final trend that we wanted to touch on today is artificial intelligence. And AI is, of course, a bit predictable, perhaps, as a trend for 2020, but we also felt like we couldn't not talk about it. Yeah, and especially because in light of what I talked about as the fourth trend, that, with quantum computing and 5G, I think a big part of what they will enable is artificial intelligence. Quantum computing coupled with artificial intelligence is going to make it possible to finally, truly, really deliver on personalized learning. That's another one of those things we said we weren't going to exactly talk about, but we said might come up.
It always slips in. There's a learner experience. Yeah.
So, we're going to be able to, with much more accuracy and better than ever before, match learners and prospective customers with our offerings and help them make use of them in the ways that are most beneficial to their particular situation and their particular needs. Artificial intelligence is also going to help us to much more accurately and predictively look at the job market. So what jobs and professions will wane, what new jobs and professions might evolve, where are we going to see growth? And then I'll mention, of course, too, that AI, we're talking about it as a trend, but it really is already here. It's really something we're already soaking in. It's built into so many of the services and tools that we already use. Think about a Google search. You just type in the first few letters and it's auto-filling for you and suggesting search terms. If you use Gmail and you're responding to a message, it'll give you some pre-scripted answers to choose from. So those are just a few quick, simple examples of how AI is already baked into what we're doing on a daily basis. And that's just going to continue to grow in 2020 and beyond. And as it grows, it really has the potential to impact pretty much every dimension and aspect of what a learning business does. It's going to impact how we understand our market, how we go about market assessment and market research. It's going to change how we develop and design learning experiences. The tools that we use for developing those are going to have more and more AI baked into them. As we mentioned with personalized learning, it's going to help us match up learners with the appropriate offerings and help them use them in the most meaningful ways for them. And it's going to help us see impact and outcomes, because we're going to be looking at some of that data after learners leave whatever learning experience we're providing and how they go back and apply it and being able to see more of that. So I think AI will have a tremendous impact in 2020 and beyond.
Yeah, so it's going to keep changing the world. It means it keeps changing work, keep changing life, which is going to change what we need to be able to teach, to provide as learning, as you noted. So keeping an eye on it is extremely, extremely important. So those are the six that we wanted to put out there: the learning experience design, conference sustainability, pathways, the 5G and quantum computing, marketing maturity, and then AI as it's trending right now. It's been trending for a while, but how it's going to continue to trend in 2020. So we'd love to hear if there are other things that are on your mind that you're really going to be focused on in 2020. Please share those in the chat right now, and make sure you are selecting, not just panelists, but everybody, so that we can have some conversation around that. And also, if you have further comments about anything that we've raised here, or questions about any of it. And as we're waiting for that, we've mentioned a few times here and there throughout Learning Technology Design LTD, our annual virtual conference that is coming up in February 25th, 27th. Registration is open right now. You can just go to ltd.leadinglearning.com. Right now, it's possible to get $50 off an individual registration or $100 off of organizational registration. If you're watching right now, that's available. If you're watching this live right now, that's available, and it will be available for a while yet. So take advantage of that. This is really the only virtual conference that's designed specifically for professionals in the business of continuing education, professional development, and lifelong learning. So if that describes you, which it probably does since you're here on this webinar, please do consider joining us for that. We've got a really great program this year, and you can check that out again at ltd.leadinglearning.com.
And we'll also mention, again, please send in any comments or questions that you have. Looks like we're getting at least a few coming in, so we'll get to those in just a minute. But we also encourage you to follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Those are both places where we share a lot of the resources and links to items, articles, and other things of interest to learning businesses. We curate those and then send those out to followers. So we encourage you to follow Leading Learning on both of those platforms, LinkedIn and Twitter.
Great. So we've had John ask here. He says, this just came to panelists. We mostly talk about learning businesses geared towards career-related learning areas among our followers. Are there education businesses geared towards recreational activities, or is that a whole other sector? So sailing, scuba, general aviation, the kinds of things where certifications are goals. We do have those kinds of followers as well. I mean, we define learning businesses broadly. A lot of folks here I know are going to be from trade and professional associations. We've historically done a lot of work there, so those would be the more career-oriented. But we do work with other types of organizations, training companies, university continuing education divisions. So anybody who's really creating and marketing adult educational experiences to adult lifelong learners, that's what we do. That's what we think of as the learning business. So any other comments or questions before we finish up here? Looks like some in the QA panel. And Charu was asked, how are shorter virtual conferences faring, e.g. 2 hours conference with multiple short tracks? That's a great question. That's sort of a micro virtual conference. You might have just invented a new genre there, Charu.
I don't have any data at my fingertips about that, but I will say anecdotally, it definitely seems to be a bigger focus on shorter rather than longer. I know even just in terms of webinars like this, even Jeff and I experimenting today in terms of our traditional length of an hour, doing about 30 minutes this time. And I know that there are a lot of other organizations that are going shorter for webinars. And so I can imagine for kind of a virtual conference potentially doing that as well.
Yeah, and that's true. Charter points out that eLearning Guild has been doing something along these lines where it is sort of a briefer event, and it's probably something we should look at doing in the coming year as well. And I like that micro virtual conference, MVC. You heard it here first, TTM. And let me see here. Somebody has asked for our Twitter handle. I'll type it in, but it's just at Lead Learning Now is going to be the Twitter handle for Leading Learning, and we look forward to seeing you there. We have at least one comment that somebody liked the 30-minute length here, so we don't want to go too much longer. We're at 31 minutes now, so we should wrap this up. But thanks to everybody for joining us. We will send out an email about this with the video and any links that we can come up that will be helpful to you. In the meantime, whatever holidays you may celebrate at this time of year, we certainly wish happy holidays to you and yours and a happy new year.
A very trendy 2020 to you all.
There you go.
So that's our quick take on 6 learning business trends for 2020. To get the show notes, go to leadinglearning.com/episode 222. And the show notes will include the reflection questions, which are: which of the 6 trends we discussed for 2020 are most relevant for and most likely to impact your learning business? And are you prepared for their impact and to capitalize on those most relevant to you trends? How might you better prepare?
When you check out the show notes, you'll also see various options for subscribing to the podcast. If you're getting value out of what you hear, we would be truly grateful if you would subscribe, as it helps us get some data on the impact of what we're doing.
And we'd be grateful if you'd take just a minute to give us a rating on Apple Podcasts. Just go to leadinglearning.com/Apple to get to the right place. Celise and I personally appreciate your rating and review, and reviews and ratings help the podcast show up when people search for content on leading a learning business.
Finally, please consider following us and sharing the good word about Leading Learning. You can find us on Twitter by going to leadinglearning.com/Twitter. You can find us on Facebook at leadinglearning.com/Facebook and on LinkedIn at leadinglearning.com/LinkedIn. We also encourage you to use the hashtag Leading Learning on each of those channels. However you do it, please follow us and please help spread the word about Leading Learning.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on the Leading Learning Podcast.